What's up, everyone? My name is Kevin Lagore, and welcome to another What's Up Webcast. We do this every Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, right here at the Skywatcher USA YouTube channel. And we basically cover everything that has to do with astronomy or equipment or basically whatever we feel like doing, as long as it's astronomy related. So, for everyone who is watching, thank you very much for joining us on your Friday morning. For those of you who are new, welcome. If you like what you see here today, or you've been watching us before and you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It does help us out. And you can also sign up to do a notification, so it'll let you know that there is a new episode coming up. We've posted all the way out to May or June. We've posted all the episodes up till June, and those are available, or the schedule is available. You'll be able to see all the up-and-coming episodes. And then, of course, all the episodes are live upon the time of their presentation, but they also are recorded right here on YouTube, so you can go back and utilize that information or watch those videos later. Real quick, I just wanted to let some of our viewers who've been watching in the past, we have upgraded the internet speed quite a bit. I switched over to fiber optic a couple weeks ago. That seems to help with the stream strength. I know people were asking about the quality, so we've been working on that. We also have a lot faster computer on order that will hopefully be doing streams through hopefully very soon, so hopefully that'll help the quality. I know people get kicked off here and there, so we are trying what we can do to make sure everything is as good as possible on our end for the webcast. So hopefully that helps you out. Hopefully the quality really does jump up with the new internet speeds and the new computer coming in the not so distant. So, well, today we're talking equipment, and we all like talking gear. I know every single star party I've ever been to, customers who call up on the phone, whatever, everyone enjoys talking telescopes. So hopefully these hour-long events on Friday are kind of where you can get your little, collection of talk with like-minded individuals while you're in the chat, or hopefully just enjoy hanging out with us on your Friday morning talking astronomy. So today we're talking gear. And in particular, we're talking our Quattro Newtonians. These have been available from Skywatcher for a while, but we thought they needed some love. And they actually are quite interesting telescopes, especially if you're an astrophotographer. And we're going to kind of get into the advantages of why. Because a lot of people, when they hear Newtonian, they freak out, collimation, oh my gosh, and then they immediately run to the hills to the refractors, and we never see them again with Newtonians. So, but we're going to kind of go through and debunk some of that stuff, so maybe you're not as afraid of Newtonians, because they are excellent telescopes. They really do a nice job, and we'll talk about the Newtonian design today, and then talk about our series of Newtonians in particular. So, alright, so Newtonians. Many of us, I'm sure, are familiar with Newtonians, either equatorial Newtonians or Dobsonians. Those are Newtonians as well. They're just on a, Lazy Susan style mount. But it is a very popular design. So if you're not really familiar with a Newtonian, or you just need a catch up on it, Newtonians are composed up of two mirrors. You have the primary mirror, which is parabolic, and you have a secondary, which is a flat elliptical mirror. Now, what does that actually mean? Is the secondary mirror it's flat mirror. There's no curve to the figure of the mirror. The primaries of a Newtonian telescope are a parabolic shape, as with most mirrors. Most telescope mirrors, you either have a spherical mirror, like what you find in the Maxitovs, and then you have parabolic, and then you get to like hyperbolic. And let me just get my face out of the way so we can all see what we're doing here. So here we go. So on a Newtonian, you have a parabolic primary, and that focuses light up into the secondary and out to the focuser. And if you're not familiar with a typical secondary, and I'm going to bring myself up here real quick because today I have props. So this is a typical secondary mirror that we use on our Newtonian telescopes. This one in particular, I think, comes off of a 12-inch Dob. Now this is an elliptical flat secondary. So you can see right there, it's a flat mirror, polished surface. There's no curvature to these mirrors. It's just made to angle the light beam up to the focuser. And the reason why they're elliptical in shape is to basically catch the incoming light cone from the primary mirror. And these are offset. So these are not supposed to be centered over the primary mirror. A typical Newtonian has to have an offset into the secondary mirror. That's why you can see that the post there is set offset. So we have people who call in or email in all the time asking, how do I adjust the offset of my secondary? You don't have to with our telescopes. It's already done permanently with the mounting stock on the back of the secondary there. So that is our typical secondary mirror. Now, you have to size the secondary mirror correctly in order to work with faster optical systems like our imaging Newtonians here. So we'll talk about that here in a second. So just as a reference here, I'm going to disappear once again. Whoop. And we're going to make this go away. So on our light path, we have the light coming in from the night sky. That is then reflected and focused using the parabolic primary mirror up to the secondary. The secondary is at an angle, so it catches that and then focuses that light up to the focuser or corrective optics or whatever you've got going up into the focus point there. So on imaging Newtonians, like what we're talking about today, they are faster optical systems, so they do require larger secondary mirrors. Now, sorry, got too many things going on. There we go. So, most Newtonians, you're gonna match the secondary mirror size for the particular telescope focal length and the size. We'll talk about that here in a minute. For most of our Dobsonians, they are oversized, but for the imaging Newtonians, because they're faster, the mirrors are much more oversized, and they're also blacked out on the edge. This is not a imaging Newtonian secondary because it's not blacked out. Now, most Newtonians need, every Newtonian's going to need a secondary mirror. And the faster and the bigger that telescope is, the bigger the secondary mirror is going to be. A lot like this secondary mirror. So, this is a monster 6-inch diameter elliptical flat. Elliptical. This actually goes to my 28-inch f3.3 Dob that's almost finished. So that's but it's no different on any Newtonian at that point. You're gonna need a elliptical flat to focus the light up to the secondary or the focuser there. So the bigger the telescope, the faster the telescope, the bigger the secondary is gonna be. Okay, so that's the optical design. Now let's actually get to learning a little bit about the Newtonians there. So now the Newtonian design, many of us are probably familiar with, was developed by Isaac Newton and was first completed around 1668 for the first version of the Newtonian, which he presented. It's a simple design. It's got two mirrors. Primary, secondary, up to the focuser. Very simplistic design. Not a lot that can go wrong. Advantages of a Newtonian is you're getting a large aperture. Big chunk of glass. You can generally make them faster, so the F ratios are generally faster. And they're fairly affordable for their size. Now, I'm sure many are familiar with Dobsonians, and you know, you can get an 8-inch Dobsonian now for $400, $500, somewhere in there. And it's way easier to make a primary mirror than it is a lens. A mirror has generally one optical surface. It just has that front, just has the front reflective surface. That's all there is to a mirror most of the time. Unlike a refracting lens, a refractor, like here's a little lens I have right here, actually. I've got lenses all over the place. This is just a little 72 millimeter lens. This is a doublet lens, so there are two lenses that make up the objective, which means two lenses polished on both sides. That gives you a total of 4 polished optical surfaces. So it's a lot more expensive to make a refractor, and it's a lot harder to make a refractor as well. So a Newtonian of similar size is much easier to produce than a refractor of similar size. So that's why a 6-inch apo refractor is going to cost $7,000 and a Newtonian of the same spec costs $300. Very easy to produce those. So, Now, let's talk about the Quattro series in general real quick. So, the Quattro series, like I said, standard Newtonians, currently come in 3 sizes. Has a parabolic primary, elliptical secondary, very standard Newtonian. 3 sizes. You have the 8-inch, 10-inch, and 12-inch. Now, what is nice about these is they're all f4. f4 is a very fast optical speed in comparison. And of course, today is going to be the world famous Kevin calculator is back. And we are working on getting this up on the website. Let me shrink myself there so you guys can see everything. So f4 for astrophotography purposes is quite fast. And the advantage of having these f4 optics means your exposure is shorter. So let me just jump into this real quick because I have a whole slide about this. So let me just talk about the features first, and the optics are one of them. So the Quattro series features large parabolic primaries. We have 94% reflectivity coatings on the primary and the secondary, so it's reflecting 94% of the light that hits the mirror. And we do have a protective overcoat over those mirrors, which means they're made to last a long time, multiple cleanings. Most coatings these days last somewhere between 5 to 10 years, depending on where you're at. Moisture, there's a lot of factors that can affect a coating, but we have an overcoat, it's a quartz overcoat on our mirrors. That means the reflective coatings will last quite a long time before you even have to consider getting them recoated. Now, Quattro series, thus the name Quattro, has f4 f ratios. All 3 sizes, 8, 10, 12, are all f4. So this is where our calculator is going to come in handy. So if we do the math real quick, let me pop this up. Let's just go off of a typical 10-inch, let's go off of an 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain. Typical 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrains, they're roughly f10 from whoever you want to buy them from. So we're looking over here right now on this one. So I don't know if there's a way I can magnify this just to... That won't worry about it. We're going over here right here on the speed calculator is where we're at the moment. So the slower f ratio we're going to compare to is a typical Schmidt-Cassegrain f10 system. And then we're going to compare that to an f4 optical system. When we do the math, that's 6.25 times faster than an f10 system. So that basically equates to, if you're doing a 2-minute exposure on an f4 optical system like the Quattro, to get the same amount of detail that you get in that 2-minute exposure at f10 would be a 12.5-minute exposure. So that speed really makes up for a lot. So why is that important? Why is the optical speed that interesting to us? Well, shorter exposures mean less taxing of a mount, means you don't have to guide as hard, You can get away with maybe having a little bit of a smaller mount. You're not as prone to vibrations or wind ruining your exposures. And you can get a lot more done in a shorter amount of time. So if you're going to be doing an hour's worth of data, we'll just say 60 minutes. So let me see if I can do this in my head real quick. This might mess up actually. But let's say you do 60, we'll do 1 hour exposure on an F4 system. So that's 60 minutes. Now, if you were to go back and do that on an F10 system, you'd basically be looking at, I believe that equates to about 6.25 hours on the F10 system for the same amount of data that you can do on an F4 optic. And this is regardless of whatever the telescope is. This isn't even our Newtonians at this point. Anything that's faster is going to give you those shorter exposures, which means you have to guide less and worry less overall. So kind of nice to have. You get more done in one night. Now, let's just compare F4 to some more popular F ratios like F7. So even at F7, like many of our refractors, like the Esprit 120, the Esprit 150, those are F7, you are 3 times faster than those optical systems. Let's speed it up a little bit more. F6.3, you are about 2.5 times faster than that. So that F ratio means you can get more done in less time, and you don't have to guide as long or worry as much about guiding when you have those faster optical systems. So speed is your friend. You can cram more exposure time. You can cram more data in a shorter exposure time. So having the faster optical speed is really something to consider when doing imaging, especially if you're on limited time. If the weather isn't that great in your area and you only have so much time to get out and shoot, maybe think of something faster optical system because you'll get more done in less time. Now, the Quattro series, we try to make sure they're pretty well set up for hardware. And they all come with basic stuff. So the focuser is a 2-inch dual-speed linear rail Crayford. So on the bottom here, there's a linear bearing rail that sits under there, and that's where the bearing presses up and moves the draw tube up and down. So it's real solid and tries to keep the draw tube square. That's dual speed. It's 11-to-1 ratio, so you get a real fine, precise capability for focusing, which is really important when you're using fast optical systems. 3 things you want to consider when going faster. Number 1, focus is a lot more critical. Number 2, collimation is a lot more critical. And number 3, if you're shooting narrowband filters, it's going to start limiting the band pass or how narrow you can actually go before it starts to clip because the light cone gets so extreme at that point. Now, at F4 to F3, you're okay. You can still use those really narrow 3-nanometer filters. If you go below F3, you're going to start having some issues with those 3-nanometer filters, so you might have to go broader. But down to F3, most of those 3-nanometer filters are good to go. And our focuser here uses the same axle as a lot of our other, like the Evo Star doublets. It uses the same central axle, so the Star Arizona motor focuser will work. I have a Quattro right now that has a EAF from ZWO on it. That seems to work okay. So a lot of those third-party motor focusers will work on the Quattro series. It's the same focuser across all 3 models, so it's very easy to adapt them to many of today's modern-day imaging hardware. Now, we also give you mounting rings, a dovetail plate, and the size of the dovetail varies on which model we're talking about, as well as a 50mm finder scope. So you're kind of equipped and ready to go regardless of which model you're working with. We try to make sure with most of our telescopes that you're set to go All you need is a mount and your camera, and poof, you're good to go at that point. So at this point, we're going to break down all three versions, and we'll talk a little bit about each one individually. Now, I know there's a topic floating around in here, or a question about why we don't do carbon fiber tubes anymore. Now, the Quattro series right now is a metal tube. I believe it's steel. I believe it is a steel tube. The factory did used to make carbon fiber versions of the 8-inch or the 200 millimeter and the 250 or the 10-inch model in carbon fiber. They stopped doing production of carbon fiber tubes several years ago. I don't really have a reason of why, but they weren't that much lighter than the steel tubes, but they were more expensive. So that probably has something to do with why we don't have carbon fiber tubes anymore. It's a price thing, and we have to look at the numbers at the end of each year and figure what makes sense. And if something's not selling as well, it just doesn't make sense for a company to continue doing it. That's just the realities of business at that point. So everything now is a metal tube on all three Quattro telescopes. So sorry, if you want a carbon fiber tube, you could probably look on some third-party sources that source carbon, or find a used one on the used market. So, and carbon's expensive, and the waste for making carbon is also expensive. So there's a lot of things to consider when using a carbon fiber tube versus the steel tube. So that's why the carbon ones aren't around anymore. Again, if you want one, find one on the used market, or there's some companies that offer carbon fiber tubes to transition your optics over to. I've seen people do it before. And no, wrapping your telescope tube in a carbon fiber wrap doesn't make it lighter weight. It just makes it look cool like carbon fiber. It's just a cosmetic. So let's start off with the smallest model in the series. This is the Quattro 200. The Quattro 200 is an 8-inch f4 800 millimeter Newtonian, weighs about 21 pounds. And we, of course, include the mounting rings, V-style dovetail, and a 50 millimeter finder. And what's unique about the Quattro 200 and one other model in the series is it actually has internal knife edge baffles further down the tube. This helps with contrast and reduces stray light. You can see the secondary there, it's all blacked out, which also helps with contrast, unlike the mirror I showed you guys earlier. That's from our Dobbs. It's just a, unpainted back. It's not a real big deal because most of this hides behind the secondary, but when you're imaging, you want to try to eliminate as much reflection, as much light scatter as possible. So the Quattro Newtonians have that all put into place. So these are all knife edge baffles all the way down to the primary. And then, of course, the secondary is also blacked out on the edges and the back to help with contrast. The Quattros also have larger secondary spiders to support the weight of the larger secondary mirrors. These are faster optical systems, so they do need larger secondaries to catch the light cone off of the faster primary optic. Now, for example, the 8-inch, the Quattro 200, being an 8-inch telescope, if we're going to look at this as a visual telescope, if we're doing the math on there, and I will bring up our calculator again. So we're going to go down here, our light grass comparison calculator right here. So that's an 8-inch telescope. Let's compare that to a 4-inch telescope. You're at 4 times more light gathering power than a typical 4-inch refractor. So the focal length of the 8-inch Quattro is 800 millimeters. There's a lot of 4-inch refractors on the market that are about that focal length. So with this Newtonian, because of the speed giving you that 800 millimeter focal length, but you still have the 8-inch aperture, you've got a lot more light, a lot brighter image to see visually through the telescope. Yes, Ernie, the 21 pounds, all of the listed weights include all the included hardware. So the finder, dovetail, and rings. That is the working weight of the tube as you get it that you're going to put onto the mount. So 21 pounds, not including, anything else you want to put on it, like a camera or something like that. But yeah, the 21 pounds. These do come with a straight through 50 millimeter finder. At the moment, we don't have a right angle finder that's just off the shelf available. Many dealers do. We are looking at bringing those in as a accessory. So keep an eye out for that. But you can easily switch out the finder scope on these to a right angle finder if you felt the need to do so. Now, the 8-inch, being that it's only 21 pounds, maybe 23, 24 pounds by the time you throw all your stuff on there, is a very versatile telescope to use on many different mounts. It's not a very big telescope. It's rather stubby for its size. My buddy Alex, who's probably watching today, I stole this picture from your Facebook. It works on a large variety of mounts. So here's just some rattling right off the top. Our EQ6R, the older EQ6, which you see here, Celestron CGEM, Celestron CGX. The AVX, you could put one on there if you're doing like basic visual, or maybe you're doing like live video for outreach or in your backyard, which these telescopes are really good for because of their optical speed. At f4, the cameras being so sensitive nowadays, paired with that fast f ratio, is a nice combo. So there's the AVX is a good affordable option. I meant to put our HEQ5 on this list too. I spaced out on that. Losmandy G11, Losmandy GM811, pretty much any mount that's got about a 30-pound capacity or more would be a nice combo with the 8-inch Quattro. So it's a fun little telescope to use. If you want to use it visually, you could pair it with an Alt-Az mount and use that to visually use it. These are great visual telescopes as well. Nice wide field with that fast optics. So, balancing the imaging Newtonians can be tricky, especially on the 8-inch because it's rather stubby. So some people have put an extra dovetail up on top there to add a little bit more weight towards the back to help balance it out, or wherever they need to do. On the larger two, the 250 and the 300, the tubes get longer, so it's a little easier to balance those out. But that is a good comment there, that these are still large telescopes. You're talking about 8-inch, 10-inch, and 12-inch telescopes at this point. The mirrors get heavy. So while these are relatively affordable for their speed and their size, you do have to consider using larger mounts for them. So it is something to consider. Here's just a demo picture. This is with a Quattro 200 with the new Starizona Nexus F3 corrector, which they're working on. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But what's cool about the Quattro 200 in particular, the Quattro 200 costs, $700-ish, somewhere in there. I don't have the price list in front of me at the moment. So you're getting an 8-inch telescope that's f4, real fast, 800 millimeter, and at 800 millimeter with most cameras nowadays, that's a nice flexible focal length. It's good for galaxies, especially right now in the spring. You're getting that image scale that you want. So it's good for galaxies. It's still a decent wide field if you've got like a larger sensor to put on it. But a similar size focal length refractor, you're probably looking somewhere between a an 80 to 120 millimeter refractor, probably an APO. So at that point, you can get an 80 millimeter APO refractor nowadays for like $800-900, which isn't bad, but then it's a 3-inch telescope. So there's trade-offs there. So what's kind of unique about the Quattros is you're getting an 8-inch telescope. So visually, it's a much more substantial telescope. You can see a lot dimmer objects with an 8-inch telescope, and it's also about almost half the price, even less for some of the larger refractors of the same f ratio. So there is an advantage to the Newtonian design, not only the speed, but the affordability, because you're getting bigger glass for less money, and you're also getting that speed. So let's talk about the middle child, the Quattro 250. The Quattro 250 is a serious telescope. This is a 10-inch f4, so 250 millimeter. It's 1,000 millimeters even. It weighs 34 pounds with all of its goodies installed on it. And it comes with the mounting rings, V-style finder, and the 50 millimeter, or V-style dovetail, and the 50 millimeter finder. This one is also knife edge baffled down the tube, and it has the blacked out secondary. It has a larger, thicker spider to help support the bigger mirror in here. But what's nice about this is now you're at 1,000 millimeters. 1,000 millimeters is really good when you're shooting those small targets, like the galaxies this time of year. It's excellent for having that image scale that you're going to want. Now, most of the 1,000 millimeter optics that are on the market are either a refractor or you have a Schmidt-Cassegrain or one of those Ritchie-Chrétiens. And either you've got a reducer on your Schmidt-Cassegrain to bring it down. So you're probably going to be shooting somewhere between F6, F7 to F8 ballpark for that at 1,000 millimeters. So let's just compare this real quick to our Esprit 150, for example. It's F7 natively, so that's about 1,050 millimeter. Compared that to a 10-inch Quattro, an Esprit 150 costs nearly $7,000. A Quattro 250 costs under $1,000. You're 3 times faster photographically with the 10-inch. And then visually speaking, let's go down here. So 6-inch telescope versus a 10-inch telescope. Visually, you're about 2.7 times more light than a 6-inch. So substantially brighter images visually with a 10-inch telescope. That's just straight physics on aperture. So it's kind of a cool system to think about. But it is, a larger telescope. So you're going to have to start considering the mount. Even compared to the 8-inch Quattro, you're talking 56% more light because of the 10-inch primary mirror. So that's quite a hunk of scope at this point. Now, the 10-inch still works on the EQ6R and similar mounts. Anything with a 44-pound-ish payload capacity or bigger works really well. EQ6, of course, our EQ8R would throw one of these around with no problem. CGEM, CGX, CGXL, G811, or even the G11 would be nice combos, or anything similar to that. The 10-inch works really well on. It's a big telescope, but it's fast. And it allows you to really dig into the nighttime sky because you have that 1,000 millimeter f ratio to go off of, or focal length to go off of. So you're getting the image scale, but you're still getting the speed. So it's a really nice combo. This is generally how I recommend balancing the Quattros as well. Either put it's usually going to be on its side. You generally want the focuser down towards the ground or up. If you want to, you can go up as well. Depends on how you want to do it. Steve here at Star Arizona, this is his setup. He's using our Evo Guide 50, which works well. Generally with Newtonians, one of the flaws of a Newtonian is you can get a lot of flexure in your imaging system. It's a large tube. There's a lot of weight, and there's a lot of weight extended past the center of gravity from the mount. So when that mount's moving across the sky, that's bending and flexing in certain ways. And flexure can provide issues when you're auto-guiding. It can make your auto-guider work harder. So it's one thing you want to think of. Now, to reduce the flexure when you're guiding, you can use like an off-axis guider, OAG for short, in the optical path if it fits in the back focus of the corrector. Or you can use a piggyback guider. But generally with Newtonians, many find the OAG route to be probably the better route if you can do it. Depends on your camera system. Some cameras have really thin OAGs, others don't. So just take a look at your system at that point. But a piggyback guider will work as well. So it's a That's a nice combo for the 10-inch Quattro there. It's a decent sized scope. It's not super heavy. So just be aware that when you do step up to the 10-inch, you're gonna have to make sure that the mount you're putting it on is ready to support it. Now, the flagship of the series is the Quattro 300. The Quattro 300 is a 12-inch, 1200 millimeter f4 Newtonian. This is a really well-built telescope. It weighs 57 pounds. It's freaking heavy. Everything about it's big. The mirror's like 1.5 inches thick, so that adds to the weight. The cell is overbuilt. The spider is thick to support that big. It's like 102 minor axis secondary mirror. It's a big secondary. So everything about this is really built to handle those fast optics, to make it rigid, and even the rings on this are big. Everything about the 12-inch is big. So if you're looking at a Quattro 300, please be aware that it is a large telescope and it is overbuilt for its size. So it'll handle and reduce the amount of flexure that you have to worry about and maintain collimation. That's a huge thing with the imaging Newtonians across any manufacturer, as they need to make sure that the cells are built strong enough to where you don't lose collimation, because you're going to notice the collimation shift at f4. There's not a lot of wiggle room to be off at that point. Now, we do include the mounting rings. We have a much larger Los Mondi or D-style dovetail. It does come with the 50 millimeter finder on the Quattro 300. This one has 44% more light than the 10-inch model does. It's a 1200 millimeter focal length. So if you're into like galaxies or small targets and you have one of those smaller chips, it's way well matched for something like this. You know, there are these telescopes out here that have the longer focal length, and what kind of sucks about what's going on right now in the telescope world is you see some of these telescopes that are natively like f8. So we'll just take like the Ritchies or the Schmidt-Cassegrains, great telescopes, but they're fairly long focal length systems. Cameras nowadays are doing the inverse. The pixel sizes are getting smaller and smaller, which isn't really intuitive to use on these longer focal length optics. So it's just, you're going to have soft images because the pixel size is not matching up correctly to your telescope at that point. Now with the Newtonians, you're starting to get that longer focal length. It's not crazy long focal length. It's about a moderate focal length. But you can better match some of these small pixeled cameras to an 800 to 1200 millimeter focal length than you can do that to a longer focal length. So take a small sensor, pair it with a 1200 millimeter focal length telescope, and you're good to go. So let me just bring up the calculator. This is a different calculator. If you've never used this is Astronomy Tools, astronomy.tools. This is a great website to go to check your field of view or calculate, your image scale or whatever. So we're going to do image scale. We already know this is 1200 millimeters. Well, this 305 is 12 inch. Doesn't really matter. We'll just pick a really popular camera that's out. Let's pick the ZW0294. That's a really popular sensor out there. So, and we'll just pick a target, for example. M51. That's up right now. That looks really good. We'll pick that guy. So you can see right there that the image scale isn't too bad. And that's a decent sized sensor. That's like a 4/3 sensor. So it's not too bad. Pixel size on this camera is 4.63, which is kind of in the middle for most cameras nowadays. Some of them are getting a bit smaller. But at native 1x1 bin, you are at 0.79 arc seconds per pixel, which is a little bit much. for most people's backyards. But you can bin that camera, giving you the same field of view, but now you're at 1.6 arc seconds per pixel. That's perfect for a backyard imaging system. Most backyards are probably going to have a resolution of somewhere between 1.5 and 2-ish. Some might be able to get down to 1 depending on your scene conditions, but this doing that 1200 millimeter focal length matches really well with some of these modern cameras. Let's go 533. That's an even smaller sensor. So we'll actually do that real quick. So there's the 533, ZWO 533 right there. It actually matches that Galaxy M51 really well. You've got some room around the Galaxy, but it still frames it really well. You're at 0.6 arc seconds per pixel at 1:1. That's going to be a little bit too much for most people's scene conditions, but if you bin it, you're at 1.3, which is, on a good night, you've probably got imaging scene conditions to support that resolution on average. You could probably get that. But not only are you shooting at 2:2, so it's sensitive, you're shooting at 1.3 arc seconds per pixel, so it's going to be sharp. You also have a big freaking 12-inch mirror backing you up, so you have the resolving power to dig in there. If you see an image between a 6-inch refractor and something like a 12-inch Newtonian, that large mirror is going to allow you to resolve finer details in the Galaxy. So there's these really elegant tendrils and all kinds of dust lanes and filaments that you can see in objects that just straight physical aperture really brings that out. So let me just show you guys. So the one thing you're going to want to, I want to show you a picture that's coming up here, but the one thing you want to think about with the 12-inch is it needs a big mount, period. If you have an EQ6R, it's not going to work. I would be really concerned if you put one on an EQ6R. If you break it, that is not a warranty issue because you're way above the payload limit. This is a 12-inch Quattro Paramount MX. That is 3 20-pound counterweights on the back, on the bar there. Yes, I do understand that the unicorn does help with this quite a bit, but it is a serious telescope. So if you're looking at a 12-inch, you're looking at like EQ8R, CGXL like minimum, G11T, the Astrophysics 1100, Software Bisque, Paramount MX Plus. You really want something that's got a 75-pound payload limit or bigger. Seriously, you really need to go big on the Quattro. So it doesn't cost a lot. I think the Quattro 12 is like under $1,500, like 14, 13, somewhere in there. You can go on our website to check the current pricing of it. So you're not spending a lot for a 12-inch f4, but it's a big telescope. So where you save the money on the tube, you're going to have to invest it in the mount. But it's a serious telescope. But here's a picture of the Horsehead Nebula with that. And you can just see the details that are inside the Horsehead there and the faint little, I call them brush strokes, that you can see up here in IC5, the IC Nebula right over here. 434, that's the number. But it just, the amount of filaments, the little faint detail that you can see in these nebulas because of the aperture is really, really nice. So it is a serious telescope when you're talking about these imaging Newtonians because you're getting serious aperture to back you up. And not only do you have the aperture in comparison to a refractor, you have the F ratio too. So you're able to do this in like half the time of some of the refractors that are on the market nowadays. Now, you do get diffraction spikes. I know we could get in an argument all day long about who likes diffraction spikes, who doesn't like diffraction spikes. I think they kind of look neat. I like diffraction spikes. If you don't like diffraction spikes, then I guess Newtonians aren't for you, or you need to make a custom one with a curved spider or something fancy like that. But you do get diffraction spikes with the Newtonians. I think they add some a little bit more dramatic look to an image, but that's just me. But it is they are serious telescopes at that point. You're getting a lot of resolution with this type of telescope. So that's really it for the 3 telescopes in the series at the moment. 8, 10, 12 all work really well for a variety of cameras. Many of the popular cameras match really well with the focal lengths of these telescopes. Let me bring this calculator back up. We'll stick with the 533. Let's go with something a little bit easier. We're going to do the 8-inch. See, the 8-inch at 1x1 bin, you're at 0.97 arc seconds per pixel. Perfect for a backyard. An 8-inch with a 533, perfect match. It might be a little, the seeing might not quite back it up, but you're going to have a nice sharp images with that combo. I know we've only got 15 minutes left. I'm going to try to go through the recommended accessories really quick because there are things you need to consider when using these. Now, with any fast Newtonian, they have Coma. If you're not sure what Coma is, Coma makes the stars at the edge of the field look like little comets, like they're flared out. It just happens with parabolic mirrors. The way to get around that, make a hyperbolic mirror. Hyperbolic mirrors, like in an RC telescope, are much harder to produce, much harder to collimate. If you want something exotic, that's an imaging Newtonian with a hyperbolic mirror, the Takahashi Epsilon series. I think they make the 130, the 160, and the famous 180, which is an f2.8 system. Those are great, fantastic telescopes, but they are a lot more expensive because they have that hyperbolic mirror on them. They also say Takahashi, so they're a lot more expensive. So with most Newtonian telescopes, you are going to need a corrector. We do make a matched corrector for this. This is our F4 Coma ED Coma corrector. Got a typo in there. Sorry about that. It's a 4-element. One of them is an ED to correct any color aberrations that might happen going through the corrector. 55 millimeter back focus. We do use 48 millimeter threads, so you can use big threads over there. It has a 28 millimeter illuminated field, which means APS-C crop sensors work really well. You could probably stick a full frame on here, but you might be pushing it on the edges a little bit there. Now, one thing to think about with Coma correctors, most of the time they have a little bit of a magnification factor. Ours doesn't. So if you're imaging, you're going to want to look at our matched Coma corrector because it keeps the system natively at f4. It won't add any little bit of magnification or slow the system a little bit. Not a big deal, but just something to think about. And again, these are best suited for crop sensors, and they are also threaded at the end of the barrel for 2-inch filters, but you could get like a filter slide or a filter wheel or whatever, depending on how much room you've got to work with, and put that on the back end here and flip your filters that way. But there is a filter thread at the front. If you're using like a DSLR, you can put like your light pollution filter in front of the corrector. It would work just fine. That's an optional accessory you can get when looking at one of these. Now, these are Newtonians, so collimation is going to be a thing. And we really like using laser collimators. We have both the Hotech 2-inch crosshair laser. I really think it's worth getting the crosshair version if you're looking at Hotech. If you're off any little bit, it's a lot easier to see the crosshair of the laser. It's not that much more money if you're looking at one, and they're really good collimators. So we have the crosshair 2-inch from Hotech. That's excellent. And then we also have the late Howie Glatter laser collimator right here. These are fantastic lasers. They are quite expensive in comparison to some of the other ones. This is the green laser. The green ones are really nice if you want to collimate during the day. If you do get one of these, they're made by Starlight Instruments, the same people who make the Feather Touch focuser now. They're still making it the way Howie did. Fantastic collimators. Make sure you get the Blug. The Blug lets you have the target there. It makes it really easy to collimate pretty much any Newtonian with something like this. You can go to Starlight Instruments and check out that. But those are the two collimators that we use. They have really good quality, so you know that the lasers are actually aligned. Some of the cheaper ones you find online and some other places, they can be good, but sometimes they can be hit and miss or out of collimation on their own, which means your telescope's going to be screwed up the minute you put the collimator in. So do invest in a good collimator. We really like Hotech or the Glatter lasers. Either one of those work, just kind of depends on your budget. The secondary mirrors are collimated by hex wrenches. They are metric. Yes, they're metric. It's okay. Go to Home Depot, get a metric set. The rest of the world is metric. It's not a big deal. So yes, they're metric. And then the back uses big collimation thumb screws, so it's really easy to collimate these even though they're f4. But a good collimator, and about 5 minutes of your time, especially when it's a new telescope, you'll be up and running in no time with a decent collimator. And they generally come they are collimated before they ship, except the 12-inch, because the 12-inch, the primary, ships separately for safety issues. It's a big mirror. So the 12-inch, you have to install the primary. It's not a big deal. But collimating these once you get them isn't the end of the world. So, real quick, I know there's some questions there. I'm going to get to those real quick. So just hold on there. Alternate correctors. If you don't want to use our Coma corrector, or maybe you want to do visual work with it, there's several Coma correctors on the market. The Botter Coma corrector I know works well. I haven't used it. Explore Scientific makes one too. I haven't used that one either, so I don't like saying anything if I haven't tried it. I'm sure they work well. We use the Teleview Paracore 2. These go down to like F3 optical systems. So we have a couple of these. This one's mine. It works really well visually for these. Excellent option, especially if you want to do visual or imaging. It does both, unlike ours, which is only for imaging. Sorry. But if you want one, you can get the Paracore 2 from pretty much any telescope dealer. They work really nicely on the Quattros. It does have a 1.15x magnification factor, which isn't a big deal. It's going to eliminate the Coma all across the field, but it makes the Quattro run at f4.6. So if you are doing it photographically with a Paracore 2, just make sure you're now running at 4.6 and not f4. It's not the end of the world, but it's just something to consider. But it's a fantastic Coma corrector, and probably one of the best for visual work. The new kid on the block, the last one I've got to talk to you guys about, is the Starizona Nexus 0.75x reducer Coma corrector. Currently, it's only for imaging. This is a reducing Coma corrector. It's rather unique. It's pretty sweet. I've got one of the prototypes right here. If you want to talk to Starizona about it, you can give them a call. I don't think these are too far out from being released. These are designed for the Quattro F4 Newtonians. This drops it from F4 to F3. That's 77% faster. So not only was it F4 was fast, but now you can pop this sucker in there and you can make it even faster. So if you're into outreach imaging, or you're doing electronic assisted imaging, live video, this really speeds it up even further. So something to consider. It's an option. Works on a lot of different other F4 Newtonians as well. So give Starizona a call and they can talk to you about that. But those are some of the recommended correctors that I've used and worked with them, and they work really, really nicely. So if you have any questions, you can email the manufacturers about that. So that's pretty much it for today. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe. We really appreciate it. I know there's some questions here. I'm going to get to those in a second. If you have any questions about the Quattros, go ahead and email us at support, or visit our website at skywatcherusa.com. If you want swag to match your Quattro stuff, we do have Quattro shirts and hoodies. You can go onto our skywatcher.threadless.com and get your matching Quattro shirt to go with your equipment or whatever else you want to do. So that's right there. If you want to go check that out, we definitely appreciate it at skywatcher.threadless.com if you want some swag. Okay, so there's some questions here. Real quick before I get to those, just for next week. Next week, the Milky Way is coming up. It's almost Milky Way season, so we're going to talk about what you should consider for getting ready for Milky Way season. So that's coming up. So we'll be talking about trackers and cameras and filters and just some things that, maybe think about before you run out to a nice dark sky and take your Milky Way picture. So that is next week's episode. So we'll definitely see you there. So, questions. Are there any focal reducers that are useful for these telescopes? The only one is the... I'm going to make myself a little bit bigger now so you guys can enjoy my beautiful face. The only corrector or reducer that I'm aware of, I know there's some other ones that are available in Europe and stuff like that. This is the only one I'm aware of here and have tested, is the Starizona Nexus Coma Corrector Reducer, 0.75 reducer. These will be available soon through Starizona. You can give them a call and talk to them about it and see what the availability and price is going to be. But it's not too big, not too heavy. 48 millimeter threads. This will handle a crop sensor. So if you have like a 2600 ZWO, put this on there. You've got an F3 system. Holy crap. It's going to be awesome. So that is the only one I'm aware of for a reducer. Newtonians don't really do well with reducers for visual work. So you're kind of just stuck at F4 if you're doing visual. Sorry. But these are great wide field telescopes. If you're looking for something to just pan the nighttime sky with, just make sure you've got a mount for it. Now, the next question here. So, will the ZWO match up with the 10-inch Quattro? Yeah, let's take a look at that, actually. Let me pull that. I don't know why that went away. Let me pull up astronomy tools real quick for you guys. There we go. Just take a sweet old time. So let's do the math. The Quattro 10 is 1,000 millimeters. It's 254 millimeters in aperture. We need to be in imaging mode. And you want to know about the 533. There it is. And we'll just pick a target. We're doing M57. Oh no, we're doing M51. I'm sorry. There it is. Add to view. So there would be your field of view with the 533. I'm sorry, I'm being informed I'm in the way. There you go. So this is the 533 camera on the Quattro 250. The scale is nice, actually. If you're into galaxies and stuff like that, this would be a nice imaging combo. You're at 0.77 arc seconds per pixel, so at 1x1 bin, you're probably going to be a little soft. You could make it work. But if you bin it 2x2, you're at 1.5. That's perfect for a backyard imaging site. So just run it 2x2 bin. 1.5 arc seconds. That's awesome. You should have really nice sharp images with a 533 and a 10-inch Quattro bin 2x2. And if the seeing that night looks good, then you always have the ability to drop to 1x1 again and go to 0.77. Or if you're going to a really nice site that you know has good seeing, and I don't mean dark, I mean stable seeing, you have the ability to pump that up to a really high resolution imaging system. But it frames up really well. Let me just show you some other... I'll just show you how Orion frames up. Orion, if you're shooting wide targets, that's not going to be a huge field of view to work with. You'd be doing really high resolution. So if you're looking for a high resolution imaging combo, that 533 or similar sensor and the Quattro 250, that's quite a combo, quite actually. So definitely want to think of maybe you've got a newer 2600. There's a 2600 right there. At F4, you'd have a really nice view of Orion at that point. And at bin 2x2, you're at that 1.5 arc seconds per pixel. So that'd be a super setup right there. Or you could combine it with the Starizona F3 corrector, which brings you to 800. Look at that. That's awesome. You're at 1.9 arc seconds per pixel at F3 with the Starizona Nexus. But you don't have to bin at that point. You're at 0.97 arc seconds per pixel. Might be a little soft on most nights. Little bit. Probably sharpen it up a little bit. But yeah, that'll be an awesome combo. So yeah, if you got most of the popular sensors that are out today, the Quattros are going to work really well because they're in that middle range focal length, 800 to 1200, super forgiving. They will match really well with most of the modern day sensors, so most of the time it's not going to be super soft in comparison to using some of the longer focal length stuff at this point. So, but that is pretty much it for today. I hope you guys had a great Friday. It was fun having you here. We'll definitely see you next week for our Milky Way season, preparing for that. I know there's some questions there about stock and when things are going to be back in stock. Just email us at support@skywatcherusa.com. Tell us what you're looking for, and we'll be able to give you rough arrival times for that given product. So thank you very much for spending your Friday morning with us. We'll see you guys next week for preparing for the Milky Way. Have a safe weekend, and take care, and clear skies, everyone.